comments from Breanna Stewart, I got to be honest. I cannot imagine with these comments she's making right here that there's going to be a strike this weekend. Like, if you feel like this is finally moving in a productive direction, why would you do that? So now I've got to wonder.
That's Breanna Stewart, Vice President of the WNBA Players Association. And what you just heard represents a seismic shift in the CBA negotiations that have been deadlocked for 17 months. After 6 weeks of complete silence from the league office, after threats of a strike this weekend, after chaos and confusion among the players themselves, Stewart just said the words nobody expected. We're finally moving in the right direction.
Has been one of the most important people to listen to when it comes to ongoing negotiations between the WNBA League office and the Players Association for the next CBA. Stewart is the vice president of the WNBA Players Association. Okay, we all know that. But the league office rectified, it's going to, let's see. Oh,
The league office went radio silent for 6 weeks after the players submitted their proposal. 6 weeks, no response, no counteroffer, nothing. And honestly, you can't blame them. The players' initial demands were so far outside the realm of financial reality that the owners looked at it and said, "Are you kidding me?" But then something changed. At the beginning of February, the WNBA finally submitted a new proposal, and based on Stewart's reaction, it wasn't just a token gesture.
To the player standards. However, it appears that this proposal was much closer to what the players are seeking, which Stewart conveyed during a February 11th episode of Game Recognized Game podcast. Quote, the CBA proposal that we got, there's movement. We got traction. We're finally headed in a direction, Stewart said. I'm so excited. I'm excited to hopefully negotiate back and really kind of do the negotiations.
17 months without actual negotiation. Think about that. 17 months of both sides just fighting about proposals they didn't like, with nobody willing to budge an inch. Stewart admits they weren't even negotiating. They were just rejecting each other's offers and digging in. But now she's saying the owners are finally being receptive to what the players want. And here's the critical part. She says the players had to put their business hats on. Which raises an obvious question. Why weren't those business hats on 3 months ago when the season was already on the line?
She later added, I'm feeling better about the direction of the CBA. I'm feeling better. The owners are finally acknowledging and being receptive to what we want. The players as well. We all had to kind of put our business hats on and get into that mindset. What took so damn long? I just want to understand, why would you not have your business mindset hat on 3 months ago? The season's on the line. That I hear things like,
there it is. The moment of clarity. Stewart is telling the other players directly, we're part of a revenue share model now. And if we miss games, it's less money, period. That's not complicated math. Every game they don't play is money that doesn't get generated, which means money that doesn't get shared. And she's not sugarcoating it either. She's basically saying, look, this is a business. We can't just reject every proposal we don't love because the consequences are real and immediate.
we're part of a revenue share model. You miss games, it's less money. Interesting. She told people, if you don't take this, we miss games, it's less money. Okay. And not to say that we should submit and just say yes to any proposals that we don't like. But this is a business now, and that's how businesses go.
Now that's the kind of pragmatic thinking that actually gets deals done. Stewart is acknowledging reality. They can't just submit to proposals they don't like, but they also can't treat this like it's not a business with real financial constraints. The problem is, not every player is on the same page with this thinking. Earlier this week, ESPN interviewed multiple WNBA players about the CBA situation, and the responses were all over the map. Some players acted like they didn't even know what was happening. Others said they couldn't afford to lose paychecks, and some said they'd fight for a while, but if the money looks good, they'd take it.
Lose money. That's pretty obvious. I'm just pointing that out. That's pretty obvious. but it is the right mindset to have. The video I did earlier, ESPN interviewed multiple players, got answers all over the place in regards to the CBA. All over the place. Some players acting like they didn't even know what was going on. Other ones saying, I can't afford to lose checks.
Here's where this gets complicated. Stewart is one of 3 prominent figures in the players' union leadership. The other 2 are Nafisa Collier and Nneka Ogwumike. All 3 are on the negotiating committee, and both Collier and Ogwumike serve as vice presidents. So when Stewart comes out with this optimistic update about the negotiations moving forward, you have to wonder, are all 3 of them aligned on this? Or is there a split forming in the leadership? The timing is suspicious. Ogwumike just went down to meet with Athletes Unlimited, and the players down there didn't sound nearly as optimistic about the proposal the league submitted. So either there's a communication breakdown happening, or there's a genuine disagreement about whether this proposal is good enough. And if it's the latter, that's a massive problem, because the players need to present a united front in these final stages of negotiation.
And now the housing thing has been, to a point, addressed. And the players, they sound like they kind of like where that's at now. I mean, I don't blame the owners in this at all. Why wouldn't you want to know? And I've said before, the players pulled this card too early. They pulled it a season too early. They should have waited and let the owners get some of that media rights money.
The housing issue has apparently been addressed to a point where players are satisfied. That was one of the major sticking points. Players demanding better housing arrangements and the league pushing back on the cost implications. If that's been resolved or close to resolved, it removes one significant barrier to getting a deal done. But the bigger question is the revenue split and how the new media rights money gets distributed. The players pulled this card too early. They should have waited one more season. If they'd let the owners actually receive some of that new media rights money, let them see a profit for once after propping up the league for decades, the owners would have been in a much more generous mood. Instead, the players are trying to negotiate their cut before the owners have seen a single dollar of that new revenue. That's a tough sell.
Earned a profit for once. And then the players would have actually got, they had a little situation where they would have got net revenue off of that. Net revenue. If they turned a profit, they get a cut. And because I've said, this is the opportunity for...
The media rights deal is everything. Ticket sales are great. Merchandise is great. Gate revenue matters, but nothing comes remotely close to the media rights money. That's where the real revenue lives in professional sports. And the WNBA just secured a significant increase in their media rights deal. But here's the catch. That money only keeps flowing if the viewership numbers justify it. If the ratings don't deliver what the networks expect, advertisers will come calling, asking for make goods and free commercial spots.
Yeah, the NFL made it up globally. Advertisers in the U.S. don't give a shit about that. That's where all this is tied together. I mean, you know, the owners that propped up the league for so long, they want to make sure it's not a blip on the radar. They want some stability.
This happens in every league, even the NFL. When the NFL fails to deliver the ratings they promised advertisers, those advertisers demand compensation. They want free spots. They want make goods. They want something to offset the fact that they paid for eyeballs they didn't get. And you can bet that after this year's Super Bowl, where 18 million U.S. households turned off the halftime show, some American advertisers are going to be making those calls. The NFL made up those numbers globally, but U.S. advertisers don't care about global viewership. They care about American households. The same principle applies to the WNBA. The league needs stability in those viewership numbers to justify the media rights money, and the players should want that stability too. But you've got so many players at the tail end of their careers who are trying to maximize their earnings right now, immediately before they retire. That creates pressure to push for more money faster, even if it's not the smartest long-term strategy.
You're probably going to have to make a bunch of money real fast with Project B. I think that's why you're seeing Nike Agumake go to Project B. She's at the very end of her career. She's going over there trying to make a couple of mil.
That's probably why Ogumike is exploring opportunities with Unrivaled and meeting with Athletes Unlimited. She's 34 years old, near the end of her career, and she's looking at alternative leagues where she might be able to make a couple $1 million before she retires. That's not a criticism, that's just reality. When you're in your mid-30s in professional basketball, you're thinking about maximizing your final earning years, not about what's best for the league in 2030. But that creates tension with younger players who have a decade or more left in their careers. Players like Caitlin Clark, who just entered the league, have very different priorities than someone like Ogumike. Clark needs the WNBA to be stable and growing for the next 12 to 15 years. Ogumike needs to maximize her income in the next 2 to 3 years. Those aren't compatible timelines, and that's why you're seeing this split in how players are responding to the CBA situation. So let's talk about what happens next. Stewart's comments suggest that a deal is closer than most people thought. The fact that she's publicly saying the negotiations are moving in a productive direction, that the owners are being receptive, that both sides have their business hats on, that's significant. Those aren't the words of someone preparing for a strike this weekend. Those are the words of someone who thinks a deal is within reach. But here's the problem. Not all the players are hearing the same message. When Ogumike went down to Athletes Unlimited and talked to those players, they didn't come away with the same optimistic assessment. Either the leadership isn't communicating effectively with the full membership, or there's disagreement within the leadership itself about whether this proposal is acceptable. And if it's the latter, that could torpedo the whole deal. The owners have been incredibly patient here. They've propped up this league financially for 27 years. Most WNBA teams have never turned a profit. The owners have been subsidizing operations out of their own pockets because they believe in the product, and they believe in women's basketball. But patience has limits. At some point, the owners need to see a return on their investment. And this media rights deal represents the first real opportunity for that to happen. So when the players come in demanding a larger revenue share before the owners have collected a single check from that new media deal, you can understand the owners' hesitation. They're essentially being asked to commit to giving away money they haven't received yet. Money they've been waiting decades to earn. That's a tough position to be in. The housing issue getting resolved is huge. That was a legitimate concern from the players, and it sounds like the league has addressed it in a way that satisfies most players. But the revenue split is where this gets complicated. The players want a 50 mic and a 50 split of basketball-related income. The owners are probably somewhere in the 35 mic and a 40% range. That's a significant gap, but it's not insurmountable if both sides are negotiating in good faith. Stewart saying we had to put our business hats on suggests the players are finally approaching this with realistic expectations. They're acknowledging that this is a business with financial constraints, not just a platform for advocacy. That's a mature approach, and it's the kind of mindset that actually gets deals done. But again, that mindset needs to be shared by the entire membership, not just the leadership. The strike threat for this weekend now seems unlikely. Stewart wouldn't be making these public comments about progress and productive direction if she thought the players were about to walk out in 72 hours. That doesn't make sense strategically. You don't publicly signal optimism right before you deploy your nuclear option. So either the strike threat was always a negotiating tactic, or the February proposal from the league was good enough to take the strike off the table for now. What's fascinating is watching the potential split emerge between the veteran players and the younger generation. The veterans want to maximize earnings immediately. The younger players want long-term stability and growth. Those competing interests are going to create tension no matter what deal gets reached. Someone is going to feel like they didn't get enough, and someone is going to feel like they compromised too much. And then there's the Caitlin Clark factor. She's not even mentioned in these negotiations publicly, but her impact on the league's viewership and revenue is undeniable. Games featuring Clark drew significantly higher ratings than games without her. Her jersey sales broke records. Her presence elevated the entire league's profile. So any CBA that gets negotiated right now is being negotiated in a landscape that Clark fundamentally changed. The question is whether the veteran players who control the union leadership are accounting for that shift, or whether they're still negotiating based on the WNBA's economics from 2 years ago. The next 2 weeks are critical. If Stewart is right and the negotiations are truly moving in a productive direction, we could see a deal announced before the end of February. That would give everyone time to prepare for the season. It would eliminate the uncertainty hanging over the league, and it would let everyone focus on basketball instead of labor disputes. But if the optimism Stewart expressed isn't shared by the full membership, If there's a revolt from players who think the leadership is selling them short, this could drag on for months. One thing is certain: the owners aren't going to wait forever. They've got expansion plans. They've got new media partners expecting content. They've got sponsors who've committed money based on specific start dates. If the players can't get their act together and ratify a deal, the owners will eventually make decisions that protect their investment. That could mean replacement players. That could mean canceling the season. That could mean a lot of things that nobody wants to see happen. So the real question is whether Breanna Stewart's optimism is justified, or whether she's out ahead of her membership. Because if the players aren't united behind this proposal, if there's a faction that wants to keep fighting for more, this could get ugly fast. And the longer it drags on, the more damage it does to the league's momentum coming off a historic 2024 season. The business hat comment is really the key. For 17 months, it sounds like at least some players were approaching this negotiation emotionally, rather than strategically. They were focused on what they deserved, what they were owed, what was fair, without fully accounting for what was financially viable. Stewart saying they had to put their business hats on suggests that mindset has finally shifted. They're now looking at the actual numbers, the actual revenue, the actual constraints, and negotiating within that reality. That's how you get deals done. Not by demanding what you think you deserve, but by understanding what the business can actually support, and finding a number that works for both sides. If the players have truly made that mental shift, a deal is close. If they haven't, we're in for a long, messy spring. So where does this leave us? Cautiously optimistic based on Stewart's comments, but also aware that not every player is on the same page, and that the union leadership might be more willing to compromise than the full membership. The next public statement from Collier or Ogumike will be telling. If they echo Stewart's optimism, the deal is probably close. If they stay silent or strike a more cautious tone, that suggests there's still significant work to be done. Either way, the clock is ticking, and the season is supposed to start in less than 3 months. What do you think happens here? Are the players finally ready to make a deal, or is this optimism premature? Drop your take in the comments.